8 years later, my sister who stole my millionaire fiancé faces me again. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. 8 years after stealing my fiancé, my sister showed up at my door shaking. I was halfway through microwaving leftover pasta when the knock started, too fast, too frantic to be a neighbor. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat now, far from the marble floors and catered parties that used to be my weekends. Back then, I was the girl engaged to Adrian, the tech golden boy everyone wanted a selfie with. Now I'm a project coordinator at a community nonprofit, good at budgets, bad at small talk, and very good at avoiding ghosts. The peephole showed me one, Chloe. Even through the fisheye blur, I saw the same glossy hair, the same expensive coat, but everything else was wrong. Her mascara was smudged, and she kept glancing over her shoulder like someone might be watching the hallway. For a second, my brain did that thing trauma does. It tried to convince me I was dreaming, that the last 8 years never happened, that my sister didn't rip my life in half for the man who promised to marry me. My heart started racing so fast I could hear it in my ears. I almost didn't open the door, but my hand moved on its own, the lock clicking louder than it should have. The smell of detergent from downstairs mixed with her perfume, some muted version of the vanilla scent she used to drown our house in. She gave me a small, shaky smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers were bare. The massive engagement ring Adrian once put on my hand, then on hers, was conspicuously missing. "Maya," she said, voice hoarse, "I need your help." There were 100 things I imagined Chloe might say if I ever saw her again. Apologies, excuses, even gloating, but not that. Not the girl who chose a millionaire and a penthouse over her own sister, standing in my chipped doorway, asking for help like we were still sharing clothes and secrets. I tasted metal, like my body was bracing for impact before my mind caught up. I should have slammed the door and deadbolted it. Instead, I realized something was very wrong, and not just with her. People online love to say, "You should have seen the red flags," like betrayal is just a quiz you failed. The truth is, when we were kids, Chloe and I were each other's whole world. Our parents worked double shifts and night shifts, so it was me braiding her hair for picture day, her sneaking extra fries onto my plate when Mom was counting calories out loud. She was funnier, louder, a little meaner. I was the one who did the group projects and remembered birthdays. The competition started small: who got better grades, whose crush liked them back, who fit into last season's jeans. It didn't feel dangerous then, just normal sister stuff. Even when she'd borrow my clothes and conveniently forget to return them, I told myself it was flattering. We were only 2 years apart. People called us the Ramirez sisters like we were one package deal. Then Adrian walked into my life and split that package. I met him at a charity gala my boss dragged me to because I could talk like a professional but still seem approachable. He was at the center of every circle, laughing too loudly. That easy confidence rich men were like cologne. When he focused on me, really focused, it was like a spotlight turned, and suddenly I wasn't the background friend anymore. He remembered little things I said. He sent flowers to my grim little office. He asked about my projects like they were world-changing. When I finally brought him home for dinner, Chloe's eyes went wide, then sharp. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, told me I'd finally leveled up. She laughed at all his jokes, refilled his wine, and I told myself she was just happy for me. I wanted her to love him like I did. I needed that. Our parents adored him instantly. Dad called Adrian our ticket out, as if I were a lottery winner more than a daughter. Mom started sending Chloe links to designer dresses Maya's fiancé might like on you girls, like we were interchangeable mannequins in his private store. By the time Adrian slid a ring on my finger at a rooftop party, Chloe already had a key card to his penthouse, so she could help with surprises, and I convinced myself it was generous, not strange. I didn't realize the real surprise was who that key was really for. The night everything collapsed was humid and electric, the kind of July evening where the sky feels too close. I was at Adrian's penthouse, pacing in a dress Chloe had picked out, waiting for him to come home from some urgent investor meeting. We were a month from the wedding. The caterer was paid. The venue was booked. My Pinterest boards were borderline offensive. He never showed. What did show up was a text at 1:13 a.m. A single paragraph that started with "I'm so sorry" and ended with "This is for the best." In between, He talked about being overwhelmed, about needing space, about not being the man I thought he was. It read like a therapist had ghostwritten it. I thought it was a joke until his number stopped working. I called Chloe 20 times before she answered. She sounded breathless, like she'd been running or laughing. Maya, calm down, she kept saying. I'm sure there's an explanation. She promised to go check on him, said she was closer to downtown anyway, and told me to stay put. I clung to that like a life raft, pacing grooves into his hardwood floors, watching the city lights blink like Morse code I couldn't read. By morning, Adrian's social media was wiped and his assistant sent a polite email saying the wedding was off and all vendor contracts would be honored and resolved privately. My parents stopped answering my calls. When Mom finally picked up, she said, "Honey, we'll talk later after everyone calms down." Like I had thrown the bomb. 3 days later, they posted a photo. Adrian and Chloe stood on a balcony I knew too well, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The caption was just a heart, and the words, "No more secrets." Comments exploded, and my phone did too. People from high school, co-workers, distant cousins, they all saw my world implode in filtered lighting and hashtags. Even the florist texted to ask if I was okay. I canceled the venue, donated the dress, and quit the job where everyone knew my business. I blocked them both and packed my life into 3 trash bags. Those 8 years in between feel like a blur when I try to list them out. Jobs taken and lost, cramped apartments, therapy sessions where I learned how to say, "It wasn't my fault," without choking. I made new friends who didn't know me as the girl whose sister stole her fiancé. I stopped Googling Adrian and Chloe. I learned my own company wasn't a punishment. And then Chloe knocked on my door like time had folded in half. Standing in my hallway, she looked smaller than I remembered, somehow. Not thinner, just deflated, like someone let the air out of her confidence. The coat was nice but slightly outdated, last season's luxury. Her nails, once perfectly manicured, were chipped at the edges. Chloe never let anything chip. "I like what you've done with the place," she offered, eyes flicking over my thrifted bookshelf and plant shelf. "It's very you." "Cheap?" I asked. Her mouth twitched. "Practical." We hovered by the door for a moment, both of us unsure if we were supposed to hug, fight, or pretend the last decade hadn't happened. My body remembered every insult disguised as a joke, every time she'd rolled her eyes when I talked about my nonprofit work. I folded my arms and leaned against the wall instead. "What do you want, Chloe?" I finally asked. "And don't say to catch up." She swallowed, throat working. "Can we sit down? Please?" The word "please" sounded foreign in her mouth. She used to act like the world owed her a red carpet everywhere she went. I gestured toward the couch, the one I'd assembled myself while watching crime documentaries on mute. She perched on the edge like she might bolt, eyes darting to the window, then back to me. Up close I saw faint lines around her eyes, the kind stress carves quietly. Her hands were trembling, and she tucked them under her thighs like she could hide the evidence. Every instinct in me screamed to kick her out, but the curiosity was louder. Then she inhaled shakily and said the one name I'd spent years avoiding, Adrian. Hearing his name out loud was like biting on tinfoil. I physically flinched. Chloe watched my reaction the way you'd watch a bomb technician, waiting to see if wires sparked. "Why are we talking about him?" I asked slowly. "You married him. Congratulations again, I guess." Her eyes filled fast, like someone turned on a faucet. Chloe was always good at crying when it counted. "It's not like that anymore," she said. "We're separated. He's in some serious trouble, Maya, and it's bleeding into everything." I didn't answer. I went to the kitchen, mostly to put a wall between us, and also because I suddenly needed something to do with my hands. I poured water into 2 mismatched glasses, then changed my mind and drank straight from the faucet instead. The metallic tang grounded me better than any breathing exercise my therapist had taught me. "Mom and Dad thought you might not open the door," she called after me. There it was, the rest of the cavalry. I came back into the living room, heart thudding. "You told them you were coming here?" "They asked me to," she said quickly. They hoped this might be a chance to fix things. For all of us." I laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Fix things?" Did they suggest how exactly? Group hug over the corpse of my 20s? "Maya, don't be dramatic," she snapped, the old edge flashing through the softness. Then she seemed to catch herself. "Look, they're worried. About me. About the family. This situation with Adrian could ruin everything if we don't handle it right. There it was again, we hadn't existed since that balcony photo. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Aunt Rosa's name flashed on the screen. She'd been the only one who didn't like the engagement picture, the only one who sent me a private message instead of a public comment. If anyone would tell me the truth about what Chloe was hiding, it was her, not the parents who chose silence. I let the call die as Chloe finally started describing Adrian's latest disaster. Adrian made some bad investments, Chloe began, like she was rehearsing a press statement. The market turned, some deals went sideways. It's complicated. Try me, I said. Our whole lives are apparently powered by his complications. She winced. He took on debt under the holding company. There are lawsuits, creditors, frozen accounts. People are angry, Maya. The kind of people who don't just send annoying emails. Okay, I said slowly. And this involves you how? You finally realized marrying a man-shaped red flag had consequences? Maya. Her voice cracked around my name. Some of the accounts are tied to me. To our parents. Adrian put things in other people's names to keep appearances. To get better terms. I didn't know how bad it was until the letters started showing up. She dug in her bag and pulled out a crumpled envelope, sliding it across my coffee table. It was from a law firm downtown I recognized from bus stop ads. I scanned the bolded phrases, personal guarantee, outstanding balance, immediate legal action. The amount made my stomach drop. Why would you sign anything like this? I demanded. He said it was a formality, she whispered. He said it was just paperwork for a bridge loan, that we'd pay it off in weeks. I trusted him. Everyone trusted him. You did, too. She wasn't wrong, and I hated that. I stared at the date on the document. It was from 5 years ago, right around the time our parents suddenly downsized their old house and moved into a nicer condo Adrian helped them find. Aunt Rosa had called me then, asking if I thought anything seemed off, and I'd brushed her off because I didn't want to talk about them. Now that memory burned, a quiet alarm I'd silenced with stubborn pride. You said Mom and Dad are involved, I said, throat tight. How much do they know? Chloe's gaze skittered to the window again, like she expected someone to be listening from the fire escape. That tiny, evasive glance was the first moment I truly knew she was still lying. I didn't call her out on the lie right then. There's a particular kind of cruelty in watching someone hang themselves with the rope they brought, and I wasn't ready to be that person yet. Instead, I asked basic questions, let Chloe talk in circles about miscommunications and temporary setbacks until the words blurred together. After an hour, I knew 3 things. Adrian was allegedly overseas handling things. Chloe was being hounded by collectors, and our parents had signed documents they barely understood. I also knew Chloe was leaving something out, something that made her eyes flinch every time I said Adrian's name. When she finally left, with promises to loop me in and maybe do dinner with Mom and Dad soon, I locked the door behind her and slid down it until I was sitting on the floor. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Took you long enough, Aunt Rosa said. She's been circling. She came to you first? I asked. She went to everyone first, Rosa snorted. Your parents, your cousins, the family group chat. Wanted sympathy and a united front. I told her she needed to talk to you, actually. I also told her not to expect the welcome wagon. Rosa didn't have all the details, but she had enough hints to confirm the shape of the mess. Adrian's company had been on a slow slide for years, propped up by flashy launches and quieter loans. Chloe had bragged about helping with paperwork and learning the business in the same time frame my therapy bills were highest. Rosa remembered offhand comments about signatures and just being a figurehead wife. After we hung up, I dug my old laptop out of the closet and started digging through digital fossils. Emails from Adrian about surprise projects, with Chloe, shared calendars, photo timestamps that didn't match the stories I remembered. His location tags, her captions, my own forgotten posts formed an accidental timeline. By midnight, uneasy patterns were emerging where I'd once only seen heartbreak. The more I scrolled, the sicker I felt. There were photos Chloe had posted from spa weekends that matched conference dates Adrian had told me about back when we were engaged. Captions about learning from the best sat under images of ledgers and laptops, with joking hashtags like #wifestatus and #bossbabe. I had never really looked at them before. Now they felt like crime scene photos. By morning, I'd made coffee strong enough to strip paint and printed out anything that looked remotely important. I highlighted dates, circled inconsistencies, scribbled notes in the margins like I was cramming for an exam no one else knew about. Chloe texted at 8:07 a.m. Exactly. Can we talk again today? She wrote. Preferably before you hear anything from Mom and Dad. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Sure. My office at noon. Neutral ground. The nonprofit I work for helps families navigate housing crises, which meant I spent my days swimming in other people's disasters. There was something grimly funny about inviting my sister into that space. She showed up in sunglasses and a baseball cap, like paparazzi were going to leap out from behind the brochure stand. Nice place, she murmured, glancing at the mismatched chairs in our lobby. Still saving the world? Still trying to, I said. Why did you really come to me, Chloe? You have lawyers. You have Dad. You still have money, I'm guessing. Her jaw tightened. Not for long. Adrian's accounts are frozen. The condo is technically under a shell company. If things go the way they're going, we could lose everything. And there's talk of criminal charges. The word criminal hung in the air between us, heavier than any designer ring. Chloe reached into her bag again and pulled out a neatly clipped stack of papers, her hands shaking harder than before. Even through the paper, I could see the notary stamps and legal letterhead. She needed me to sign something that would tie me directly to Adrian's mess. An affidavit? I repeated, flipping through the pages. Legalese swam in front of my eyes. You want me to swear that Adrian always handled the money, that you and our parents were just innocent bystanders? That's the truth, Chloe insisted. Mostly. I mean, I signed what he told me to sign, but I didn't understand half of it. The lawyers say if the family presents a united narrative, if we show Adrian was the mastermind, it'll help keep us out of it. Us, I echoed. You mean you? And Mom and Dad, she added quickly. They could lose the condo, Maya. Their retirement. Everything. Please. You know how they are with paperwork. They barely read rental agreements. I thought about the law firm letter. The timelines. The way Chloe had posed with spreadsheets like they were accessories. My stomach twisted. She had known enough to brag, at least. I'm not signing anything today, I said finally, setting the stack down like it might bite. I need to get this looked at. By someone who doesn't have a vested interest in protecting Adrian or protecting you. Her eyes flashed. So this is punishment? Because I took him? You didn't just take him, I said quietly. You helped him erase me. And now you want to write me into his crimes. She opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time since she'd shown up at my apartment, she looked less like a drowning person and more like someone calculating who they could pull under to stay afloat. She gathered the pages with stiff fingers, but left a photocopy on my desk in case you change your mind. After she left, I sat alone under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the office, listening to the copier hum in the next room and the muffled sound of a client's baby crying down the hall. Other people's emergencies suddenly felt less distant. I made 2 calls, one to Aunt Rosa, and one to a legal aid attorney we partner with who gave me the number of a mediator named Jordan who handled messy family financial disputes. That night, I promised myself I wouldn't sign anything until I knew everything. Jordan agreed to meet after skimming the documents I emailed over, and his response was the first thing that made my lungs loosen in days. These are not forms you sign because someone cries at you, he said over the phone. His voice was calm, measured, the verbal equivalent of a weighted blanket. If what you're telling me about the timeline is accurate, your sister wasn't just naive. She was involved. We need everyone in the same room, with copies of everything, before anyone signs anything. Everyone? I asked. Your parents? Your sister? Maybe Adrian, if he's reachable. In a neutral space. No one's penthouse, no one's childhood home. We ended up compromising with a restaurant, one of those faux fancy places with dim lighting and too many forks. Mom insisted. If we're going to have difficult conversations, she texted, we should do it somewhere nice. We're still a family. When I walked in, I saw the old seating chart had reassembled itself. Chloe next to Mom, Mom next to Dad, leaving a chair at the end for me like the kids' table got pushed up against theirs. Adrian's seat was empty, but his ghost hung in every polished surface. Maya, you look good, Dad said, like that was a peace offering. Nonprofit work must agree with you, Mom added, the word nonprofit bending just slightly, like it tasted sour. The first 20 minutes were appetizers and small talk about nothing that mattered. Chloe laughed too loudly. Mom refolded her napkin 3 times. Dad reached for the wine list like it was a lifeline. I watched the performance, feeling my grip on my own version of history start to slip. "So," Dad finally said, clearing his throat. "About this affidavit Chloe mentioned. We just need to show the courts that Adrian misled all of us, that we were innocent. It's just a simple formality, sweetheart." Mom nodded, eyes glossy. "We can put the past behind us if we stick together." Then Chloe raised her glass and started rewriting the past, and I almost let her. "First of all," Chloe said at the restaurant, glass raised like she was giving a wedding toast, "I just want to say how grateful I am that Maya is willing to help the family after everything. It shows how mature she's become." The table murmured approval. I felt my jaw clench. She went on to describe the situation as a tragic misunderstanding. Adrian had always been a risk-taker. The market had turned suddenly. No one could have predicted it. She framed herself and our parents as trusting innocents, dazzled by jargon and love. In her version, the betrayal 8 years ago was a youthful mistake we'd all grown past. When she implied I'd always had trouble understanding the financial side of things, something in me snapped back into place. I heard Jordan's voice in my head. "These are not forms you sign because someone cries at you. I haven't agreed to anything." I cut in. "And I do understand the financial side of things. I understand dates, especially." Chloe's eyes narrowed for half a second before she pasted the smile back on. "Of course, we'll go through everything together," she said smoothly. "Maybe with the lawyers Adrian found. Or with someone who doesn't answer to Adrian," I replied. That was the moment the close call ended. I almost slid back into my old role, the quiet sister who made things easier. Instead, I set the trap. 2 days later, we were in Jordan's conference room. Neutral gray walls, a long table, separate folders laid out like place settings. Aunt Rosa sat at the far end by my invitation, knitting needles clicking softly, looking more intimidating than any lawyer. My parents huddled together. Chloe sat opposite me, and there was an empty chair at the head of the table for Adrian that stayed painfully, deliberately vacant. Jordan explained the ground rules. No interruptions, no shouting, everything backed by paper, and asked us each to confirm we understood. Jordan folded his hands, eyes steady, and reached for the first thick folder between us. The first folder held the law firm letters Chloe had shown me, plus a few she hadn't. Jordan slid copies to each of us. Dad's hands shook as he read. Mom's lips moved silently, sounding out phrases like joint and several liability. "These demand letters reference a personal guarantee," Jordan said. "Signed by Chloe, and one by your parents. We'll come back to that. For now, I want to look at chronology." He opened the next folder. Out spilled my midnight archaeology, printouts of Chloe's posts, Adrian's old emails, calendar invites, screenshots with dates circled in neon highlighter. Seeing my heartbreak laid out in bullet points made me feel strangely detached, like I was reading a case file instead of my own life. "Here," Jordan said, tapping a photo where Chloe was grinning over a laptop. Captioned "Late-night modeling projections for my man." Posted 3 weeks before the text where Adrian ended the engagement with Maya. Mom frowned. "That can't be right. Chloe didn't get involved in the business until after the breakup." Aunt Rosa snorted softly, not looking up from her knitting. "Mija, you were bragging about spreadsheets at Thanksgiving that year," she said. Jordan slid another page forward, an email from Adrian to me about a quick trip to San Francisco on the same weekend Chloe had tagged him in a story from a secret getaway in Napa. Timestamps didn't lie. Neither did the bank transfers Jordan pointed out, money moving from Adrian's company into the shell corporation that owned my parents' condo. Each highlighted line felt like another nail sealing a crate around the fantasy version of our family. "This is what concerns me," Jordan said evenly. "Not just the debts, but the pattern of concealment. And the fact that, Chloe, you signed these guarantees after you were already actively involved in the business." Color drained from Dad's face. Mom's hand flew to her chest, fingers digging into the fabric of her blouse like she needed something solid to hold. Chloe's composure finally cracked, and she turned her anger squarely on me. She glared across the table and demanded how long I'd been investigating her. "Since about the moment you showed up at my door with a stack of lies," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't lower it. This isn't spying. It's me finally looking at what you did. Jordan redirected us before the argument could spiral, but the damage was done. The meeting dragged on for 2 more hours as we walked through each document. Every time Chloe tried to gloss over a detail, Jordan brought us back to it. Dates, signatures, wire transfers, memorandums with her initials on them, not just Adrian's. In the end, there were a few undeniable conclusions. Adrian had orchestrated a web of loans and shell companies. Chloe had helped maintain the illusion long after it was obviously crumbling. And my parents had signed guarantees they didn't understand because they trusted their rich son-in-law and their favorite daughter. I didn't think it would get this bad. Chloe kept repeating, mascara streaking. We all benefited. Mom, Dad, you like the condo. You like the vacations. Dad put his head in his hands. Not like this, he muttered. Not if it was built on lies. Jordan laid out options, negotiations, potential settlements, the possibility of cooperating fully with investigators if criminal charges did materialize. None of them were simple. All of them carried risk. One option, though, was very clear. I did not have to sign anything connecting me to Adrian's schemes. Outside the conference room, Mom caught my arm. If you don't help, she whispered, they could take everything. We're your family, Maya. We were a family when I was crying on the bathroom floor, too, I said. You picked a balcony photo over me. Work didn't pause for any of this. I still had clients facing eviction, landlords ignoring calls, kids who desperately needed a stable address for school enrollment. Juggling their emergencies and my own made me feel like, some days, I was constantly one step away from dropping everything. In the parking lot, I realized my survival might cost our family. In the weeks after the meeting, fallout spread like a slow-motion emotional avalanche. Adrian finally surfaced through his lawyer, sending word that he intended to make things right, which somehow involved everyone else taking on more of his responsibility. Investigators began circling the company, asking for records. Chloe moved out of the condo into a smaller rental on the edge of town, insisting it was temporary. I kept my promise to myself. I didn't sign their affidavit. Instead, with Jordan's guidance, I provided a separate written statement. Clear, factual, boring. I laid out what I knew, what I'd seen, and what I refused to speculate about. It was the first time I'd ever put my version of events in writing where other people couldn't edit it. Mom stopped calling as often. When she did, the conversations were stiff, crowded with silence and half-finished sentences. Dad apologized once, murmured that he wished things were different, that none of this would have happened if Adrian hadn't fallen for you girls, like we were matching accessories instead of his daughters. Chloe sent late-night texts that veered between guilt and accusation. You're really going to watch them lose everything? Would be followed, hours later, by I'm sorry, I know this isn't your fault. I'm just scared. I answered only a fraction of them, mostly with some version of I hope you're talking to your lawyer. Aunt Rosa, meanwhile, showed up at my apartment every Thursday with empanadas and questions about my actual life. She badgered me into going back to therapy and into joining a hiking group where, to my own surprise, I made friends who only knew me as Maya from Housing Services. One of them, a nurse named Eli, listened to my half-redacted family stories without flinching and never once asked what Adrian had been like. Therapy gave me language for the unease. I could set boundaries without issuing ultimatums. For the first time, I considered closing the door on them deliberately. People always ask, when they hear the short version of my story, whether I forgave my sister. The honest answer is that forgiveness turned out to be less interesting than distance. Chloe and I aren't no contact, not exactly. We exist in a kind of low-volume orbit. She sends me periodic updates about the legal chaos. Adrian finally accepting a plea deal, the sale of the condo, my parents working with financial counselors instead of private bankers. Sometimes she slips in a memory from childhood, as if reminding me there was a time when we were just 2 girls sharing a room and a busted CD player. I read them. I rarely reply. When we do see each other now, holidays at Aunt Rose's, mostly, it's different. She doesn't reach for my hand or my clothes. She doesn't make little jokes about my job. I catch her watching me when she thinks I'm not looking, like she's trying to figure out how I built a life without the things she thought were essential: money, proximity to power, the illusion of being chosen. The truth is, my life is small by Instagram standards. I share a cheap gym with strangers, not a private trainer with a skyline view. My vacations look like state parks and packed lunches, not international resorts. But my rent is paid on time. I sleep at night. I know exactly whose name is on every document connected to me. Closure didn't arrive in a single dramatic confrontation. It arrived in a series of choices. Choosing not to sign. Choosing to tell the truth, even when it made me the villain in someone else's story. Choosing Thursday empanadas and muddy hiking boots and the steady, unremarkable kindness of people who don't care who I was engaged to 8 years ago. If you're listening to this because someone in your family picked money over you, here's what I can tell you. You don't owe them your ruin to prove you still love them. Maybe one day she'll grasp the size of the hole she helped carve into my life. Until then, I'm guarding the one thing she never valued, my peace.